No, he had said no 100 times before the second 100 times, and it still hadn't gone through Chris's thick skull. Wesker tossed his party invitation to the trash and sat back in his chair. He didn't do parties unless they were formal gatherings, like galas or balls, and even if those serve inconveniences. But house parties? No, definitely not. It was bad enough that his subordinates acted like animals on a regular basis, save for Jill. She might be on the fence with that one. Wesker removed his glasses and rubbed his dry eyes. He sought out his eye drops from his drawer and squeezed the 2 drops in each, blinking a few times before putting the bottle away. They're all juvenile. Add the influence of alcohol into war zone. Wesker stood up and packed all the loose files in a manila folder, opening a side table drawer, closing it shut, and slammed it, the echo that empty Star's office. He shut the computer down and grabbed his jacket from around the car, throwing it over his shoulders. Slinging his duffel bag over his arms, he made his way for the exit, but stopped when his office phone rang. He furrowed his brows in frustration. He contemplated hanging up or ignoring the call altogether. But his team crossed his mind if he wondered if any of them, particularly Forrest, had gotten wasted and was running naked down the street with Sharpie all over his face. Or better yet, perhaps one of them choked in their own vomit. Wesker smirked at the thought and picked up the phone. "Captain Wesker?" "Hey, come in, AI," came William Birkin's timid voice from the other end. "Damn it, William! How many times do I have to tell you not to call me on this line?" He clenched and unclenched his jaw, a habit from many years of putting up with nonsense primitive minds. At times, William's lack of common sense. "If you're worried about me, don't. I was just heading out." "Don't worry, Al. Actually had plans tonight," William finished, his voice filled with embarrassment. There was a pause on Wesker's end. His frustration melted away. A grin formed and he chuckled forward. "Oh, William, you know I don't usually give out the best idiot awards to those outside this office, but it seems like you might win this one." "I'm serious, Al. Make fun all you want, but Auntie and I are going out for dinner. It's, bonding time." "So you must really want to get laid then, A pity that such a luxury seldom crosses your path. You might want to take advantage of it." "Oh, look who's talking," William retorted on the other end. "Mister and I get what I want when I want. I've never seen you with a woman, let alone hear you talk about getting laid." Wesker scrunched his face. "Believe me, I'd rather take cyanide capsules and then discuss my sex life with you. You probably pass out from hearing all the wonderful things I've experienced that you aren't privy to." He checked his watch. "But enjoy your little date, William. I've got to run, you see. I have 2F plans." William laughed on the phone. "Yeah, the puppet shows in the libraries are on Saturdays, Al. Looks like you'll be staying in tonight." "On the contrary, I have somewhere to be." His eyes traveled to the invitation in the trash. "I will speak with you tomorrow. And remember, don't forget the extra small things. We won't need another bundle of joy into this disgusting planet." The line shortly went dead after. Wesker tapped his fingers on his desk, wondering if he could really go with this supposed plan, or take William's advice and stay home. Surely he'd find something to do. Those files could use my attention. I occur any real man, but she's perfectly shaped. It only enhances her beauty. Wesker saw Jill dip her head back into the fridge to probably cool off her red head and come back with a bottle of Bud. Enrico and Barry glanced at another as Jill approached. She handed Wesker the beer, looking into his shades with a daring smile, before walking off to join the guys in the living room. Wesker smirked to himself, cracking open his beer and downing himself a bottle with one drink. With a satisfied sigh, he looked over the seat of the table with Enrico and Barry. "I hope this isn't what we're going to do all night." "I don't know. Ask Redfield." Chris put a bottle of Patron's silver tequila out of his cabinet. "Well, at least our dear captains aren't entertained, Barry. I think it's time to pull out the big gun." "I don't know, Chris," Barry teased. "They might not have the livers for them." "Get a load of these smartasses, Wesker." Enrico grabbed the bottle from Chris. "Give me a shot glass." Enrico. We are going to have a contest to see who can last the longest. I saved this guy just for the occasion. You might as well forfeit, Chris, Wesker said, placing his empty bottle on the table. We both know your alcohol tolerance is mediocre at best. There is no contest here. I think the captain's calling you out, Chrissy, Forrest said over the sound of Mario Kart in the background. Yeah, well, he could say all he wants. Talk is cheap. As is your tough guy attitude, Wesker replied. Pull up a chair and I'll show you how a real man drinks. Chris smiled and motioned for Barry. Sure, Wesker, let me go into the garage. I got most of my special shot glasses there. We'll be right back. Something about Chris's change in demeanor puzzled Wesker, but he shrugged it off knowing that Chris was just stalling. It wouldn't be difficult to him to beat in his own game. Are we really gonna do this? You know I'm usually all for getting a rinse out of captains, but this... Come on, Barry. Don't you chicken out on me now, Chris replied, and corked another bottle of silver tequila. This will go nicely. Just play along and it will be cool. Grab those other shot glasses, would ya? Took you both long enough, Noriko muttered, as he put a cigarette butt into the ashtray. Now, how is this going to work? Chris shrugged his shoulders. Well, Barry and I thought we'd drink against you two and see which team is better. Chris could see the gears running in Wesker's head, as enough as trying to figure out the real motive behind their game. Not tonight, Sherlock. Well, what do you think, Wesker? Should we school these women on how to drink? Hey! Jill entered with her arms crossed, glaring at Daggers and Noriko. Don't put me in the same boat as those two. I can hold my liquor quite well, thank you, she said, taking a seat next to Wesker at the table. Oh, well, you know what I mean, Jill, Enrico reasoned. Those people need to be taught a lesson, that's all. What you say, Alpha Captain? Jill nudged Wesker's shoulder playfully. Wesker clasped his hands on the table and shrugged. I suppose if you really want to lose, I won't object to serving them up. Excellent, Chris said as he pulled up a chair. Barry sat beside him. Now here's how the game works. Jill and the others will throw out random questions, and if they betray us, we take a shot. For example, Jill sat up straight. Have you ever kissed a dog? Everyone looked at Jill in disbelief. Glances shared around, and even Forrest, Joseph, and Brad paused the game. Okay. Chris furrowed his mouth a little. What the hell to Jill? Well, if anyone had to kiss a dog, you'd have to take a shot. No ifs, ands, or buts. Right, alright? This is not only a fun game to watch and laugh at, but at the time is real and serious stuff asked. You'll be gone to care. Any questions? So what happens if we choose not to answer rather personal? We're penalized for that? Wesker asked. No, I mean, I don't see why you wouldn't answer with a shot unless you don't mind bitching out. But then don't bother playing. Wesker smirked and took a shot glass from the table and slid it to Noriko. Fill her up then. Noriko filled his and Wesker's glasses, while Barry and Chris filled out their own bottle. Now that everyone has got a glass, let's get started. Jill, and keep it legit, okay? Chris winked. Jill cleared her throat. Okay, have you ever had a threesome? Right then from the get-go, eh, Jill? Wesker mused as he threw back his shot, slamming down the glass right after. Chris nearly choked down in his own shock. A shock ran over his features. From everyone's expressions, he wasn't the surprised one. Captain, you a threesome? Barry couldn't help but feel slightly embarrassed. The entire Stars team knew very little about the Alpha Captain, and delving into his sex life wasn't exactly the direction he felt comfortable with. It really boggled on his mind. Are you just shocked for Chris? Wesker asked as Enrico filled his empty glass. Clearly a rhetorical question. Barry decided to swallow his answer and to wait for the next question. That was interesting, Jill said into the awkward silence. It didn't really intrigue her that she would get the guys. Wesker probably had to admit that nobody knew about. Have you ever had a meat stick in the office? Joseph asked with a grin plastered on his face. All four players drank their shot. No surprise, Forrest added. He waited for the shots to be refilled. Have you ever, played with yourself while at work? Okay, this is getting gross. Jill attempted to leave, but Wesker placed a hand over her thigh and gave a gentle squeeze. Jill looked over and a hand back at Wesker. Stay, Jill. You might learn something. Jill could already hear the faint slur in the captain's speech as he downed another shot with Chris. Her blood burned beneath her skin and filled out her cheeks until they were hot. She bit her lip and sat back down. Even the sound of the trio's laughter was in the living room wasn't enough to see her nerves. The strong hand on her thigh, belonging to the very attractive captain, didn't help either. It's my fault, Jill thought. You mentioned one thing about, well, you know, and they all turned deprived lunatics. Even Wesker. Jill gulped. Perhaps this was what he meant by learning something. You're a chicken, Forrest elbowed Brad in the ribs, and immediately turned a light shade of red. He rubbed his back of his head nervously. Have you ever went at it with someone at the station? Jill covered her eyes. Oh, for crying out loud, she groaned. Even the shyest guy on the team is one of them. She jumped slightly when Wesker's glass hit the table. Her eyes widened like teacup saucers. Wesker, no, please tell me you haven't done that. Chris and I can see, but not you. Wesker leaned forward inches from Jill and removed his glasses. Despite the amounts of shots already consumed, Jill couldn't see Wesker focus falter. He was looking right into her eyes, petrifying her on the spot. Now, Jill, that's not very nice to say. It is so wrong we admit our desires and the deeds we have committed. When it involves playing with ourselves or hooking up with girls at the station, yes, it seems wrong, Captain. And you of all people. Me of all people? Wesker raised a cocky eyebrow, showing off a grin that made Jill bite her inside of her cheek. I wouldn't point fingers, Jill. I'm pretty sure you're very well entertained by all this. Jill gasped, narrowing her eyes in offense. That's not true, Wesker. Oh, he picked up his and filled his shot glass. Have you ever fantasized about Miss Valentine? What the hell? Jill threw her arms down in frustration, as 3 out of the 4 tilted their back their drinks. Barry shook his head. Come on, Captain, that's just a little too much. Besides, Jill isn't even playing. Wesker filled his glass, ignoring Barry's pleas, and slid it to Jill. Jill, have you ever wanted to take one of your fellow officers to bed? Your superior included? Jill shrugged with herself, digging her nails into the palm of her hands and biting her lip and thought. She would be classy about the whole ordeal and walked out, or be a big girl and show the boys that she isn't afraid to admit anything. She picked up the glass and drowned it, giving her captain the most defiant look as she's ever conjured up. Wesker smiled in satisfaction. Good. He drawled back and took another shot for him. He nodded and while remaining the tequila in his bottle. Finish it up, Enrico. We're done here. Enrico picked up the bottle and dropped it off at the table, passing out face first on the table shortly after. Ah, damn. Barry stood up and helped Bravo Captain sit up on his chair. Yeah, Enrico's out cold, and Wesker's nearly there, so that means we've won. I'm out of nowhere out cold, Chris. Wesker spat and stood abruptly, too fast for his own good. He wavered the place, and he placed his palms on the table, balanced himself. Jill stood up, concerned for her captain, would fall and crack his skull open. She placed a hand on his back. Then slowly, Wesker looked up at Chris with furrowed brows. How is it that you are both still sober? You're not slurring or acting like a bunch of wild apes. You certainly have not bested me in this game. Chris smirked devilishly and uncorked his bottle, taking a large gulp. Sorry, Wesker, but I couldn't let you win this time. Barry and I filled this empty bottle with water and pretended to drink with you guys. That bottle is the only one you have is tequila in it. Wesker gritted his teeth. You tricked us? Pretty genius, right? Guess you didn't see that one coming. Oh, Chris, you picked the wrong man to mess. The moment Wesker removed his hands from his table, his head began to spin and he lost sight of himself. He blindly reached out to grab something and grabbed onto Jill's shoulders, pulling her down as his dead weight fell on top of her. Wesker! She shouted, trying to push his head off her breast. Chris, don't just stand there! Chris and the others howled with laughter as they watched Jill continue to struggle. She pressed Wesker's shoulders in hopes to move him off, but it was no use. The man was much, much heavier than he expected. Jill, Wesker drawled, slowly picking his head up. I apologize. This is not my intention, but I must say this position is rather welcoming. He chuckled into her breast and gave a sigh. Damn it, Wesker, if you don't get off of me, I'm gonna knee you in the groin. Fuck, this is not happening. Wesker raised his head once more. That's not very ladylike, Jill. This isn't a time to be judging my lack of manners, Wesker, she replied calmly as she could. Lying on top of your subordinate isn't exactly gentleman manner. So get a grip, hypocrite. Chris, having to cry himself laughing, finally came to his senses and dragged Wesker off of Jill. Wesker groaned and rolled onto his back, closing his eyes and finally passing out. Frost, help me out. Joseph was at Chris's side and grabbed Wesker's arm. Holy shit, you weigh a ton, Captain. They brought Wesker over to the couch and dropped him onto Joseph's seat. Barry, bring Noriko over here, Chris instructed. Brad and Forrest moved from the couch as Barry carefully propped Noriko against the headrest. Well, that was a first, Forrest commented. What is? Barry asked. The captains passed out before we did. Two captains were shoulder to shoulder on the couch, and Chris couldn't help but laugh at how silly they both looked. God, they are never going to forgive us for this, Jill said absent-mindedly as she shook her head. That's for sure, Joseph agreed. I could barely hear Wesker saying, You all have disappointed me and brought this shame onto stars. 50 laps on all of you, and 50 more if you can't do them in under an hour, blah blah blah. Everyone muffled their laughs as so not to wake the captains. Chris smiled. You know what? Let's make it worth it. Hell, we're going to get in trouble anyway. What do you mean? Barry asked. You'll see. Screw punishment. We're going to get murdered when they wake up, Joseph said, holding his laughter as he clasped Enrico's left hand with Wesker's right. Forrest had glued paper eyeballs to Wesker's lenses and slid them over his eyes. Jill had put hair clips through Wesker's hair, pinning large clumps together so they stick out all in angles. Red lipstick was smeared on both their mouths, courtesy of Brad. Chris had put one of Claire's bras over Wesker's shirt and stuffed cups in with toilet paper. Barry had taped a side with I love Wesker written on Enrico's stomach. We'll never get the end of this, Jill said as she had her hand over her mouth. We only live once, Jill, Chris said. Great job, guys, so who's sleeping over? The next morning, Wesker stirred in his sleep and took a gulp of air before his eyes slowly opened. He was met with darkness, only to realize he was wearing his glasses. He sighed and pressed his palm to his forehead. He had too many shots last night and had let Chris talk to him into that stupid game. Ah, yes, Chris. I haven't forgotten about your treachery. He removed his glasses immediately to notice Chris bundled up in his sleeping bag on the floor and the other criminals at his side. Wesker grinned. Just wait until I get my hands on you. His grin faded when he noticed the fake eyeballs on his lenses. He scrunched his face in confusion. He realized that the idiots were probably the ones that did it, and then Wesker's face fell when he felt what seemed like clammy fingers moving against his own hand. He slowly turned to find Enrico up against his shoulder with a hand clasped against his own. Drool had trailed down from the corner of Enrico's lipstick, covered the mouth into Wesker's shirt. The blonde immediately yanked his hand away and wiped the sweat from his jeans, tearing the love note off of Bravo Captain's stomach, crumbling it down his palms. He chucked at the baseball bat at Enrico's head. Wake up, Enrico! Now, Wesker received, and gave a rough shove against the other's shoulder. Enrico groaned and opened his eyes reluctantly. It's Saturday, Wesker. And just before he closed them, he looked down at Wesker's chest. Nice bra, by the way.